Why God isn't removing someone from your heart. 5 hidden reasons. Pause here for a moment and let this settle, because there is a reason these words are reaching you now, at a time when you've likely asked God the same quiet question more than once. You've done your part. You've prayed for peace. You've asked for clarity. You've tried to release what keeps resurfacing in your thoughts when the day slows down and the noise fades. And still, that person remains. Unexpectedly present in your heart, not loudly, not obsessively, but persistently. This isn't weakness, and it isn't disobedience. Sometimes God allows a name to linger because He's doing something deeper than removal. He's revealing. There are seasons when God doesn't take someone away because their presence is serving a purpose your mind hasn't caught up to yet. Often, He uses people as mirrors before He uses them as memories. Through this connection, something in you was awakened. Your capacity to love without armor, to care without calculation, to feel deeply in a world that often rewards emotional numbness. That awakening wasn't accidental. God reveals our depth before He redirects our path. If this person stirred emotions you didn't know you carried, it wasn't to break you, it was to show you who you are becoming. And here's something rarely said but deeply true: God doesn't rush the lessons that shape destiny. Understanding comes quickly, embodiment takes time. You may intellectually know why something didn't work, yet your spirit may still be integrating what it learned. Love teaches in layers. Perhaps this connection taught you devotion, but you're still learning discernment. Perhaps it taught you patience, but boundaries are still forming. God doesn't remove what still has work to do within you. What lingers isn't delay, it's development. There are also connections that reach beyond emotion and touch the spiritual. These are the ones that don't dissolve easily because they aren't surface level. Soul ties unravel gently, not violently. God is careful with hearts that feel deeply. He untangles slowly so healing doesn't wound you further. That's why release hasn't come abruptly. It's being done with intention. If you've noticed patterns lately, repeating numbers at meaningful moments, quiet nudges toward stillness, an unexplainable sense of protection even when emotions feel heavy, those are not random. Angel numbers like 1111 appearing during prayer or reflection, 222 during moments of trust versus fear, 444 when exhaustion meets reassurance, 555 when change feels near but undefined, these are markers. They're reminders that God is active in the unseen. Another truth worth hearing is this: sometimes God allows the heart to hold on because surrender hasn't fully shifted from control to trust. Wanting answers is human, but God often asks for rest before resolution. There are times when peace doesn't come from closure, but from acceptance. When you stop wrestling the feeling, it loosens its grip. God teaches trust not by explaining everything, but by holding you steady while the explanation forms. And then there's the part that feels both hopeful and unsettling. Sometimes the story isn't finished the way you assume. That doesn't always mean someone is meant to return, but it does mean something is meant to resolve. God doesn't waste genuine love. If something remains in your heart, it's because it still serves a purpose, either to prepare you for what's coming, or to free you from what's been holding you back. Both outcomes are acts of mercy. The ache you feel isn't punishment, it's refinement. God shapes hearts He plans to use. The fact that you still care doesn't mean you're stuck, it means you're open, sensitive, and spiritually aware. That sensitivity is not a flaw, it's a calling. You are learning how to feel without being consumed, how to love without losing yourself, how to trust God even when emotions don't offer neat answers. This season is doing quiet work inside you. And what comes next will bring clarity to what feels confusing now. Whether the path leads to release, understanding, or an unexpected shift, it will arrive gently, not abruptly. If you feel a calm beneath the heaviness as you read this, that's reassurance. God is close. He hasn't ignored your prayers. He's answering them in layers. And when the purpose of this connection is fulfilled, peace will settle in a way that feels natural, complete, and unmistakably divine. What follows this stage is not confusion but alignment, even if it doesn't feel clear yet. When God allows someone to remain in your heart, He is often inviting you into a deeper level of awareness rather than asking you to relive the past. This is where many people misunderstand what's happening. They assume the lingering emotion means attachment, but in reality, it often means transformation. Certain connections arrive not to stay forever, but to awaken parts of the soul that were dormant. Through this person, you learned what resonance feels like, how energy can recognize energy without effort, how presence can feel familiar even without history. That awareness changes you permanently. Once you've felt that level of connection, your spirit refuses to return to shallow ground. God allows the feeling to stay because it recalibrates your discernment. You no longer accept what once felt tolerable. Your standards shift quietly. You crave sincerity over intensity, depth over drama, peace over performance. This refinement is intentional. God reshapes desire before He fulfills it. There is also a divine timing element at work that the heart cannot always perceive. Some connections are not meant to unfold immediately because both people are still being positioned. Growth rarely happens simultaneously. One soul awakens first, the other follows later, and the distance between those awakenings is not separation, it's preparation. God uses that space to mature character, strengthen boundaries, and remove dependencies that would otherwise damage what He intends to build. This is why forcing release too early can feel painful. The soul senses that something is still forming. Another truth worth acknowledging is that God sometimes leaves a connection unresolved because resolution is not the same as closure. Closure is human, resolution is divine. Closure seeks explanation. Resolution seeks peace. Peace arrives when the lesson is no longer resisted. When the heart stops demanding answers and begins trusting direction, emotional weight lightens naturally. The connection no longer pulls, it informs. At this stage, memories lose their sting. The person remains present in thought, but without distress. That shift is evidence of healing in progress. You may have noticed moments where the emotional charge softened without effort. That's not avoidance, it's integration. God also allows certain names to remain because they act as spiritual markers. They remind you of who you were before awakening and who you are becoming now. Through this connection, you learn discernment, patience, emotional honesty, and self-respect. Those lessons anchor you as you step into your next season. Without them, you might have repeated patterns that no longer serve your growth. God is protective of hearts that are meant to build something lasting. That's why he slows the process. Signs along the way are not meant to confuse but to reassure. Repeating numbers, intuitive nudges, moments of calm after prayer, these are confirmations that the process is active even when outcomes are unclear. God often speaks through subtlety when something carries weight. Loud direction is reserved for urgent correction, quiet guidance is used for sacred transitions. Another layer of this experience involves trust, not trust in another person, but trust in yourself and in God's timing. When emotions linger, they test whether you will cling or surrender. Surrender here does not mean letting go prematurely, it means releasing control over how and when clarity arrives. Control tightens the heart. Trust softens it. And a softened heart is fertile ground for divine alignment. As trust grows, fear diminishes. You stop asking when things will make sense and start noticing that peace is already forming underneath uncertainty. That peace is not accidental. It's evidence that God is stabilizing you internally so that what comes next does not overwhelm you. There is also the possibility that the connection has not completed its purpose yet. Not because something must be rekindled, but because understanding is still unfolding. Some lessons reveal themselves in hindsight, not in real time. God allows emotional residue to remain so that insight can mature fully. Once maturity is reached, release becomes effortless. You don't force it, it happens naturally, like outgrowing a season without resentment. The heart knows when it's finished learning. Until then, it holds gently. What's important to remember is that God does not confuse His children. If something remains, it remains with intention. Nothing in your emotional world is wasted. Every feeling is being used to shape wisdom, depth, and discernment. And what lies ahead will reflect that growth. When the next connection enters your life, whether it's a return transformed by time or something entirely new, you will recognize the difference immediately. It will not feel heavy or uncertain. It will feel calm, steady, and aligned with who you've become. This season is not about holding on, it's about becoming ready. And readiness is not loud, it is quiet, grounded, and patient. God is not delaying your peace. He is preparing it to last. As this process continues, something subtle but powerful begins to happen within you. You stop defining the connection by longing and start understanding it through meaning. This is a crucial transition. When God allows someone to remain present in your heart, He is often guiding you toward deeper self-knowledge rather than emotional attachment. At this stage, the connection no longer feels like a question that needs an answer, it feels like a chapter that is still teaching. You may notice that the ache has softened into reflection, and reflection into clarity. This shift signals spiritual maturity. The heart is no longer grasping, it is listening. God often allows emotions to linger so that wisdom can take root. Lessons that pass through feeling leave deeper imprints than lessons learned intellectually. Through this experience, you are learning discernment on a soul level. You recognize what resonance feels like versus attraction, what safety feels like versus excitement, what truth feels like versus fantasy. That awareness will guide every future connection you encounter. Another layer unfolding now involves identity. You are not the same person you were when this connection first entered your life. Your values have clarified. Your tolerance for inconsistency has decreased. Your sense of self has strengthened. These changes didn't occur randomly. God uses meaningful connections to refine identity. When someone stirs your inner world, it reveals what matters most to you. That revelation shapes direction. This is why God doesn't rush emotional release. Identity needs time to recalibrate. As this recalibration happens, emotional weight shifts. Thoughts may still arise, but they no longer pull at you. They simply pass through awareness. That neutrality is not indifference, it is integration. The connection has moved from the heart center to its foundation, where it supports growth instead of disrupting peace. God often moves emotions to safer internal places before removing them entirely. There is also a relational dimension at work. God prepares you to engage future relationships from wholeness rather than yearning. Wholeness attracts alignment. When you no longer seek completion through another, you are ready to receive partnership without losing yourself. This is why lingering emotions do not always signal unresolved attachment, they often signal preparation for something healthier. The universe, too, participates in this refinement. Synchronicities become less frequent but more precise. Guidance arrives in the form of intuition rather than signs. You simply know when something aligns and when it doesn't. That knowing is cultivated through experiences like this one. God develops spiritual discernment through lived emotion, not abstract understanding. At this stage, patience deepens. You no longer feel compelled to rush clarity or force outcomes. You trust that what needs to surface will do so naturally. That trust shifts energy. Resistance dissolves. Peace becomes more accessible. This is not complacency, it is confidence in divine timing. God teaches timing by withholding answers until readiness replaces urgency. Another truth becomes evident now. Not every connection that lingers is meant to return, but every connection that lingers leaves something valuable behind. Wisdom, empathy, self-respect, emotional intelligence, these are the gifts extracted through reflection. God does not leave residue without intention. What remains serves to fortify you, not weaken you. As this understanding settles, emotional intensity fades without being suppressed. You are not forcing detachment, you are allowing transformation. This is how healing occurs sustainably. Forced release creates resistance. Natural release creates peace. God favors peace. You may also notice an increased capacity for compassion, not only for others, but for yourself. You stop judging your feelings. You stop labeling your process as failure. You see it as formation. Formation requires time. God works in seasons, not moments. Each season carries a purpose. This one is shaping depth. Depth prepares you for stability. Stability supports longevity. These qualities matter more than passion alone. As your internal world stabilizes, external alignment follows. Opportunities shift. People enter and exit your life with less disruption. You remain centered. That centeredness signals readiness. When something aligned approaches, it will meet a grounded version of you. That version is not searching, it is receptive. God does not bring lasting connections to restless hearts. He brings them to steady ones. The presence that once felt heavy now feels instructive. The memory that once triggered emotion now triggers insight. This progression marks the nearing end of the lesson. Completion does not announce itself loudly. It arrives quietly, with acceptance. You will know when it happens because the connection will no longer feel like something you carry, it will feel like something that carried you through growth. At that point, whether the person remains or fades becomes secondary. What matters is who you've become. And who you've become is prepared for what comes next. God does not keep hearts in limbo. He refines them until they are ready to move forward without fear. And when that readiness is complete, peace will feel natural, not forced. As this season deepens, a quieter truth begins to surface. What has stayed in your heart is no longer about the person, but about the alignment God is cultivating within you. This is where many misunderstand the process. They assume lingering emotion means unfinished business, when in reality it often means completed transformation. At this stage, the connection stops asking for attention and starts offering understanding. You may notice that when thoughts arise, they don't destabilize you anymore. Instead, they feel informative, almost neutral. This neutrality is not numbness, it is strength. God moves emotional experiences from intensity into insight when their purpose has been absorbed. You are now seeing clearly what once felt confusing. Patterns that used to repeat no longer appeal to you. Emotional dynamics that once felt familiar now feel foreign. This shift did not happen overnight, it emerged through reflection, patience, and inner honesty. God allows the heart to hold on to meaning until wisdom replaces attachment. That is what is happening now. You are no longer interpreting this connection through longing, but through discernment. Discernment doesn't reject emotion. It understands it. As this understanding grows, your emotional center stabilizes. You trust yourself more. You rely less on external validation. You feel grounded even when answers remain incomplete. This groundedness is essential. God does not move people into new chapters until they can stand firmly within themselves. That stability protects what is coming next. Another layer of this phase involves self-forgiveness. You may be recognizing places where you once blamed yourself. Questioning whether you stayed too long, felt too deeply, or hoped too much. That self-judgment is beginning to dissolve. You are realizing that depth was never your weakness, it was your instrument of growth. God used your capacity to feel as a teaching ground, not a liability. When compassion replaces self-criticism, emotional weight lifts naturally. You are not being asked to erase the past, you are being invited to honor how it shaped you. As this happens, the universe responds by simplifying your emotional environment. Fewer triggers appear. Fewer internal conflicts arise. You feel more at ease in solitude. Silence becomes restorative instead of heavy. This is not withdrawal, it is regulation. God restores nervous systems before introducing new relational dynamics. A regulated heart can receive without fear. This is why peace is increasing, even if clarity hasn't fully arrived yet. Peace often comes before explanation. You may also notice your intuition strengthening. Decisions feel clearer. Boundaries feel easier to hold. You don't second-guess your instincts the way you once did. That confidence is not arrogance, it is alignment. God sharpens intuition through experiences that require emotional honesty. The connection that once stirred uncertainty has now refined your inner compass. You know what feels right and what doesn't without needing justification. That knowing will guide you forward safely. Another important shift occurs here: the emotional narrative changes. Instead of asking why something happened, you begin asking what it produced. That question leads to empowerment rather than confusion. You see the growth. You recognize the maturity. You feel the difference in how you respond to situations now. This awareness marks the closing of a chapter, not through force, but through fulfillment. Fulfillment doesn't demand closure, it creates it. God closes doors gently when the lesson has been integrated fully. At this point, the connection no longer defines your emotional state. It exists as a reference, not a weight. That distinction matters. References guide, weights burden. God removes burdens when they've served their purpose. What remains now is clarity. As clarity settles, anticipation for what's ahead begins to feel calm rather than anxious. You are no longer waiting, you are ready. Readiness doesn't come with urgency. It comes with assurance. Assurance that you can meet what's next without losing yourself. Assurance that you no longer need to chase understanding. Assurance that peace is stable within you. This is the preparation phase many overlook because it lacks drama. Yet it is the most important. God prepares hearts quietly so that when alignment arrives, it can stay. The emotional space that once held longing is becoming space for presence. Presence attracts what belongs. When the next connection enters your life, whether through a familiar face transformed by time or an entirely new beginning, it will feel unmistakably different. It will not ask you to prove yourself. It will not destabilize your inner world. It will meet you where you are grounded. That is the sign of divine alignment. The process you've been in was never meant to trap you in memory, it was meant to elevate you into readiness. And now, that readiness is visible in how you move, how you choose, how you trust. God has not delayed your peace. He has been building it carefully, layer by layer, until it could stand on its own. At this point in the journey, something essential becomes clear. What once felt like emotional resistance has transformed into inner alignment. The presence that lingered in your heart is no longer asking to be held onto or pushed away, it has become a quiet witness to how far you've come. This is the stage where God allows understanding to replace confusion. You may notice that the memory of this person no longer carries urgency or pain, but a sense of meaning. Meaning does not demand answers. It offers perspective. You can now see how this connection redirected your path, not by force, but by awareness. It slowed you down when you were moving too quickly. It awakened depth where surface-level comfort once sufficed. It taught you how to feel without losing your center. These lessons did not arrive gently at first, but they have settled into wisdom. God often uses emotionally significant experiences to stretch capacity for patience, for compassion, for discernment. Without that stretching, the next season would not be sustainable. As this wisdom integrates, your emotional responses change. You pause before reacting. You observe before engaging. You trust your intuition without needing confirmation. That trust signals readiness. When readiness is present, God begins shifting circumstances quietly. You may notice life feeling simpler. Fewer emotional extremes. Less internal debate. A growing sense of steadiness, even in uncertainty. This steadiness is not indifference, it is emotional maturity. God values maturity because it protects what He plans to bring into your life. At this stage, the heart no longer feels divided. You are not torn between holding on and letting go. You are simply present with what is. Presence is powerful. It allows truth to surface naturally. Another change unfolds here. The narrative around the connection loses its emotional charge. You no longer need to define it as loss, failure, or unfinished business. It becomes part of your story without controlling it. This reframing is essential. God heals by changing interpretation, not by erasing memory. When interpretation shifts, emotional weight lifts on its own. You may also notice that your expectations of relationships have evolved. You are less impressed by intensity and more drawn to consistency. Less tempted by mystery and more grounded in clarity. These preferences are not random, they reflect internal alignment. God reshapes desire so that future connections align with your nervous system, not just your emotions. As this happens, discernment becomes effortless. You sense when something aligns without overthinking. You recognize when something is misaligned without guilt. This clarity prevents you from repeating cycles that once felt inevitable. God breaks cycles by strengthening awareness, not by forcing outcomes. There is also a deeper sense of self-respect forming now. You value your emotional energy. You protect your peace. You no longer offer access to people or situations that destabilize you. This protection is not fear-based, it is wisdom-based. Wisdom is the byproduct of lived experience. God does not waste experience. Every moment of confusion contributed to clarity. Every unanswered question strengthened trust. Every emotional wave increased resilience. As this phase completes, anticipation for the future begins to feel calm rather than anxious. You are no longer scanning the horizon for signs. You are grounded in the present, confident that what aligns will arrive naturally. This confidence shifts energy. It signals to the universe that you are no longer seeking completion through another, you are open to partnership from wholeness. Wholeness attracts stability. Stability sustains connection. This is why God allows certain experiences to linger until wholeness is established. Without wholeness, alignment collapses under expectation. You may sense a growing openness now, not toward a specific outcome, but toward life itself. Curiosity replaces fear. Trust replaces urgency. You allow space for the unknown without feeling lost. That openness is fertile ground for divine movement. God works most freely where control has softened into faith. At this stage, the connection that once felt central fades into the background, not because it was insignificant, but because its work is complete. Completion feels like peace, not relief. Relief releases tension, peace stabilizes. Peace is what God offers when transformation has taken root. From this place, whatever enters your life next will meet a version of you that is grounded, discerning, and emotionally available without being vulnerable to harm. That is the preparation this season required. God did not leave something in your heart to confuse you. He allowed it to remain until it strengthened you enough to move forward wisely. Now, the space that once held longing is becoming space for presence. Presence invites alignment. Alignment brings connection that feels safe, mutual, and enduring. What lies ahead will not resemble what came before. Not because it will be louder or more intense, but because it will feel stable, reciprocal, and rooted in truth. This is the quiet reward of the work you've done. As this chapter nears its completion, the story shifts from inner processing to quiet embodiment, where everything you've learned begins to live in how you move through the world rather than how you think about it. This is the phase where God's work becomes visible not through signs or emotions, but through stability. You may notice that your reactions are different now. Situations that once stirred uncertainty no longer unsettle you. You respond with clarity instead of confusion, with patience instead of urgency. That change didn't happen because the past disappeared, it happened because it no longer controls you. The person who once occupied so much emotional space now exists in a different role, not as a longing, not as a question, but as a marker of growth. Their presence in your heart reshaped how you love, how you choose, how you protect your peace. And that reshaping was the assignment. God often leaves someone connected to us internally until their influence has fully transformed our behavior. At this stage, you are no longer asking what it meant, you are living the result of what it taught. You carry yourself differently. Your standards are clearer. Your boundaries are quieter but firmer. You don't need to announce what you won't accept. You simply don't engage with it anymore. That discernment is evidence of healing. It shows that the lesson has moved from awareness into wisdom. As this happens, life begins responding to you differently. Opportunities feel more aligned. People who don't match your frequency drift away without conflict. New interactions feel lighter, more honest, less performative. You're not trying to be understood, you're being yourself. That authenticity is magnetic. God prepares hearts for alignment by removing the need to perform. When performance ends, connection becomes possible. Another subtle shift emerges here, your relationship with time changes. You no longer feel rushed to arrive somewhere emotionally. You trust the pace of your life. Waiting doesn't feel like punishment, it feels like protection. That trust allows peace to settle more deeply. Peace is not passive, it's grounded confidence in God's orchestration. You're no longer bargaining for outcomes. You're allowing unfoldment. That allowance creates space for something new to enter without resistance. The emotional energy that once circled the past is now available for the present. You feel more present in conversations. More attuned to your intuition. More aware of what nourishes you. These are not small changes. They are indicators that your inner world is no longer divided. Division creates tension. Integration creates calm. God moves people forward only after integration occurs, because what is integrated cannot destabilize you later. There's also a noticeable increase in self-trust now. You don't second-guess your feelings as much. You don't override your instincts to please others. You honor what feels right without needing external permission. That self-trust is crucial. It means you're prepared to meet future connections without abandoning yourself. God does not bring aligned people into lives where self-abandonment is still active. This phase is about ownership, owning your emotions, your choices, your pace. Ownership replaces attachment. You're not holding on to anyone, you're holding on to yourself. And in doing so, you create safety internally. Safety is the foundation of any lasting bond. As this continues, you may reflect on the journey with a sense of gratitude rather than regret. Not because everything was easy, but because everything served a purpose. Gratitude signals completion. It means the heart no longer needs to extract meaning, it has received it. When gratitude appears naturally, release follows gently. There's no dramatic goodbye. No forced forgetting. Just a quiet sense of closure that doesn't need explanation. God closes chapters by changing how they feel inside you, not by erasing them. The story becomes something you can look at without pain, something that contributed to who you are now. And who you are now is ready. Ready for connections that meet you where you stand. Ready for experiences that don't require sacrifice of self. Ready for love that feels mutual, steady, and grounded. This readiness is not about anticipation, it's about availability. You're available to life without clinging to outcomes. That availability invites alignment. As you move forward, what enters your world will feel different from what came before. It will not demand emotional labor to maintain. It will not create confusion. It will feel clear, supportive, and consistent. That difference will be unmistakable. And when it arrives, you'll recognize it not because it feels intense, but because it feels right. This is the quiet culmination of the work you've done. God allowed something to remain in your heart long enough to change you, not to trap you. Now that change is complete. The space that once held unanswered emotion is open, calm, and receptive. From that space, the next chapter can begin, one built on wisdom, stability, and a deeper understanding of what love is meant to feel like when it's aligned. As this journey reaches its final stretch, something profound settles in, a sense of quiet knowing that doesn't need to announce itself. You may notice that you're no longer looking back with the same intensity. The story that once felt unresolved now feels complete in a way that words can't quite explain. This is the moment when God's intention becomes embodied rather than understood. The person who once occupied so much emotional space no longer defines your inner landscape. Instead, they stand as a chapter that shaped your capacity for wisdom, patience, and self-respect. You didn't lose anything in this process, you gained discernment. You gained depth. You gained the ability to remain present with your own life without being pulled backward or forward by unanswered questions. That is not something that happens by accident. God allows certain experiences to stay with us long enough to rewire how we relate to love itself. At this stage, your relationship with memory has changed. Thoughts may still surface, but they arrive without charge, like pages you can read without reliving. That emotional neutrality is not coldness, it's integration. It means the lesson has settled into your character. You respond to life differently now. You're less reactive, more observant. You notice how quickly you can return to calm after disruption. That calm is earned. It's the result of inner alignment replacing emotional conflict. As this happens, the world around you reflects the shift. Interactions feel simpler. Expectations feel lighter. You don't feel compelled to explain yourself or seek validation. You're grounded in who you are becoming. That groundedness acts like an anchor, keeping you steady even when circumstances change. God prepares people for their next chapter by strengthening their sense of self, not by distracting them with noise. Another subtle but important change appears here. You begin trusting your inner timing. You no longer measure progress by external milestones or compare your path to others. You sense when something is ready and when it's not, without needing proof. That intuition is refined through experiences like this one. God teaches timing by allowing us to sit in uncertainty until certainty emerges naturally. As certainty takes hold, fear loses its grip. You're no longer afraid of missing out or making the wrong choice. You trust that what aligns will find you. That trust changes how you move through the world. You're open without being exposed, confident without being rigid. This balance is rare. It's also essential for what comes next. Because what comes next will require presence, not protection. God does not bring meaningful connections into lives that are still bracing for impact. He brings them into lives that are stable enough to receive without defense. This stability shows up in small ways. How you speak, how you listen, how you hold space for yourself and others. You're no longer trying to be understood, you're expressing yourself honestly and letting resonance do the rest. Resonance always finds its match. As this phase continues, gratitude may surface unexpectedly. Not gratitude for pain, but gratitude for growth. You see how the experience expanded your emotional capacity rather than diminishing it. You recognize that the tenderness you felt was evidence of your humanity, not a flaw. God doesn't ask us to harden our hearts, He teaches us how to steward them wisely. That stewardship is now evident in how you protect your peace without closing yourself off. You've learned that boundaries and openness can coexist. This understanding prepares you for connections that are mutual, respectful, and grounded. The heart that once held uncertainty now holds clarity. Not all answers, but enough. Enough to move forward without regret. Enough to trust the unfolding. Enough to feel whole. And wholeness is the signal God waits for before opening the next door. When wholeness is present, new beginnings don't feel like rescue, they feel like alignment. As you stand here now, you may sense a readiness that feels calm rather than urgent. You're not waiting to be chosen or saved or fixed. You're available to life as it is, confident that what belongs will arrive in its time. That availability is powerful. It invites experiences that meet you at your level of growth. Whatever enters your life next will feel different from what came before. It will not demand explanation or endurance. It will feel clear, reciprocal, and steady. You'll recognize it not by intensity, but by ease. Ease is the mark of alignment. This is the quiet culmination of the work you've done. God allowed something to remain in your heart long enough to refine you, not to hold you captive. Now that refinement is complete. The space within you feels open, grounded, and ready. From this place, the next chapter doesn't need to rush in, it will arrive naturally, fitting into your life with a sense of rightness that doesn't need to be justified. And when it does, you'll understand why everything unfolded the way it did, not with relief, but with peace. As this journey comes to its final unfolding, what emerges is not an ending but a quiet arrival into truth, the kind that doesn't announce itself loudly because it doesn't need to. You may notice that your inner world feels settled in a way that once seemed unreachable. The restlessness that used to accompany unanswered questions has softened into acceptance. Not resignation, but understanding. The connection that once occupied so much emotional space has completed its work, and what remains is not attachment but wisdom. You are no longer carrying the experience, it has been absorbed into who you are. This is how God completes His work in the heart, not by erasing what mattered, but by transforming it into strength. You now move through life with a deeper sense of self-awareness. You recognize emotional patterns before they repeat. You sense alignment without needing reassurance. You trust your inner voice because it has proven itself reliable. That trust did not come easily, it was cultivated through patience, reflection, and the willingness to sit with discomfort long enough for clarity to form. God often brings people through seasons of emotional depth so they can develop discernment that cannot be taught any other way. At this stage, your relationship with love itself has changed. Love no longer feels like something that destabilizes you or pulls you off center. It feels grounded, mutual, and safe. You understand now that real connection doesn't create chaos, it creates coherence. This understanding prepares you for what lies ahead. The heart that once questioned its own resilience now knows its capacity. You've learned that feeling deeply is not a liability, it's a gift when paired with wisdom. As this realization settles, gratitude replaces longing. Not gratitude for what hurt, but gratitude for what healed. You see how the experience refined your boundaries, sharpened your intuition, and strengthened your sense of self. You're no longer tempted to romanticize uncertainty or chase intensity. You value presence, honesty, and emotional availability. These values are now embedded in how you live, not just what you want. God often waits for this embodiment before allowing the next chapter to open, because embodiment ensures sustainability. Sustainability is what allows blessings to last. You may notice that life feels simpler now, not because it lacks complexity, but because you no longer complicate it with self-doubt. Decisions feel clearer. Choices feel aligned. You trust yourself to navigate whatever comes next. That self-trust is the foundation upon which meaningful relationships are built. God does not bring aligned connections into lives where self-trust is absent. He brings them where confidence and humility coexist. As you stand in this space, there is a sense of readiness that doesn't rush or demand. You are open without expectation. Available without attachment. This openness is powerful. It creates room for what belongs to enter naturally. You're no longer scanning the horizon or revisiting the past. You're present, attentive, and grounded. Presence attracts alignment. Alignment sustains connection. Whatever comes next will meet you at this level of awareness. It will not require you to abandon yourself or revisit old patterns. It will feel reciprocal, steady, and supportive. You'll recognize it not because it overwhelms you, but because it fits. That fit will feel familiar in the best way, like something you've been prepared for rather than something you stumbled into. This is the quiet reward of the inner work you've done. God allowed something to remain in your heart long enough to shape you, not to keep you tethered to the past. Now that shaping is complete, the space within you is clear, open, and strong. From here, life moves forward with a sense of ease that doesn't need explanation. The next chapter will not arrive with force or urgency. It will unfold gently, aligning with who you are now. And when it does, you won't question why it came this way. You'll simply know that everything before it led you here, not as a detour, but as a design.